Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex, and are we gonna get a free Medusa tier 4? No, not free, but I didn't have to use a ticket. We are not. That's great. I love this song. We're at 96%. This is so stupid. So I decided I'm not gonna tier 4 Medusa in this video. I apologize, but it's just really stupid. I can just wait a few hours and then get this for free rather than having to spend $15 to buy a ticket because I don't have any more in my inventory. I just have a superior ticket, and there's no reason to use a superior ticket on a regular character. I was thinking of tier 4ing a different character, but a lot of the tier 4s that I want to do right now are universal, believe it or not. So yeah, it's actually super triggering. So instead, we're gonna do a Miles Morales review. It's fine. He's actually quite good, and he's catapulting himself to the top of a pretty niche meta list, but a meta list nonetheless. So this review isn't just to say, oh yeah, this uniform is better than the old uniform for playing as Miles Morales. If you're using Miles Morales as a tier 4 striker, you actually may have hit gold or even diamond, particularly if you're a PvP player, and I'll explain why in just a second. But let's check out the rest of the build here. We have 13 Odins. We don't have any, engraved or glory holes. We don't have his Sword of Bone elite gear built up at all. So this is a pretty straightforward base tier 4 build. I will switch the striker here to something a little bit more interesting with Black Widow. We have the stage 12 Power of Angry Hulk. We do have the maxed out artifact, which is helpful for high-end World Boss Legend pluses like Thanos and Black Dwarf, I guess, but not really necessary whatsoever. So you can ignore the artifact. You do not need it. He's not a PvP threat, at least yet for now. And then we have a Brilliant Judgment. It is a brilliant CTP. It's not the greatest roll. So it's a 200 roll, which you can get on a Mighty or a regular Judgment. And then it's a 60% amplification. So you can actually mimic a lot of the results that I'm going to be getting with a perfectly rolled Mighty Judgment, which is still difficult to roll, but it's not like I have, a 70 type amplification, which is almost double the max of a Mighty, which is 40, and then a 240 proc at the bottom, which is obviously, a little bit more, it's like 20% more than the 200 proc, or 40% more than the 200 proc. Anyways, you get what I'm trying to say. Now, as far as his abilities as a striker, in order to show you, it's going to be kind of boring because I have to play ABX, I have to play ABL. So I want you to just believe me. Take what I'm saying on belief. Other people have tested this. I've actually tested it as well. And Miles Morales with this build, with a Brilliant Judgment, is giving higher scores, higher returns than the same run with Black Widow with a Brilliant Energy. Additionally, you can also use Miles for ABL, where previously you would have to rely on Ghost Rider with a PvE build like Judgment or Competition, or something like maybe Thor, I guess, with the old uniform, or Gambit, who I have down here. I haven't tier 4'd him yet. Gambit with like a Mighty or a Brilliant Energy for ABL. But Miles Morales can actually play double duty, and in particular, for Black Widow and Ghost Rider, this is huge because both of those characters are seen somewhat for PvP action in Otherworld Battle and Team Battle Arena. Not so much in Timeline Battle, but for all of the other PvP game modes that require a wider roster, Black Widow does see some use with symbiote support and symbiote synergy, and Ghost Rider obviously sees a ton more use now that his 4th skill has a full iframe. So a lot of people who enjoy PvP have actually pivoted Ghost Rider to a PvP build, but then that hurts their ABL scores because he's no longer striking to do as much damage. But now Miles can come in and fill a lot of that gap, fill a lot of that role. Ironically, you can't use Miles as a striker for Miles, so we're just gonna have to use Black Widow here again. Well, let's take a look here. Don't get the tier 3 charge up. Yeah, it's pretty much impossible to get that charged up right away. Let's just go at it. It's hits anyways, it's not damage for ABX, excuse me. So we're just trying to rack up those hits. There we go. I think this is pretty solid for A guy who is, yeah, dude. Very nice. Not bad. It should be a little bit higher. It should be closer to 8 million. I'm a little late on my rotation. But yeah, 8.5 million. Probably should be closer to 9 million. For the first minute is not bad. I know there's a tapering off that happens with ABX. But not bad, dude. Not bad. Yeah. And so easy to play. So fun to play. Zipping around. Slamming down. Very nice, dude. For people who were using Bullseye, this is probably like a no question you can't really upgrade unless you were to give him a comp. But for people who, give Miles a comp, I should say. But for people who are using Gwen, this might be as good. Or maybe only slightly worse. Gwen's also really easy to play. But you do have the added benefit, if you're thinking about tier 4ing either Gwen or Miles, you do have the added benefit with Miles of being able to use him as a premier striker for both ABX and ABL, and that's worth quite a lot. Okay, so we're actually not gonna score. Looks like we're not gonna score as much as I thought we were. Yeah, I guess a Mighty Judgment does fall off a lot at the end. Perhaps there's something I can do to line up the Judgment proc more with the tier 3. But honestly, this is not bad. This is not bad. This is probably only... It's like 1 million or less than what I would get with a Mighty Rage Gwenpool. And the reason why I bring this up is because in terms of value, you're going to get more value out of tier 4 Miles than tier 4 Gwen, because you can use Miles as a striker as well. And he can bump up your scores in ABX, he can bump up your scores in ABL. And then as I was explaining earlier, because he can take on that dual role as a striker, although he may not be like the absolute best, you know, with the identical build, for both ABX and ABL, he can free up those characters. So then you can use Ghost Rider in PvP if you want. You can use Black Widow in PvP with a PvP build, with a competition, with a conquest, with a greed, rather than having to use an energy or a comp specifically to just make them into strikers. So I think that's where a lot of his value lies for higher end accounts. But for newer accounts, he certainly represents a more attractive option, particularly because you can actually go and buy the old uniform as well and have a dual character, right? You basically have a speed male hero and a speed male villain wrapped in one. And so for newer accounts that can't tier 4 that many characters, this is actually a pretty nice value value proposition. And it also helps to future-proof your account better against the upcoming ABX ABL changes that they've teased and talked about since last year's Black Friday dev note. So I do see him as straight up better than Gwenpool in that case. Obviously, for just scores, you'd have to compare them equally with the same build, so I'd have to go and give him a Mighty Rage or give them both a Mighty Comp or something like that. For overall value, he does represent a lot more. Unfortunately, Gwenpool still has the additional 4% Pierce, and that is very, very good for newer accounts, so it is a little bit tough. It is a little bit tough. Gwenpool definitely still has value. It's just that she only has value as a villain, not as a hero. And she has less World Boss Legend, Legend Plus value than Miles does, where he can still shred those stages. And he has more build options. You can go comp, you can go rage if you're trying to maximize scores, or you can go judgment, and you have a lot more flexibility, right? You have a lot more value in a lot of content overall, although you aren't going to have as much top value as a performer in specific content that requires a comp or requires a rage CTP. For those still wondering about his value with the old uniform versus the new one, This is going to be a test on 69 of Kang. Now, the biggest issue for Miles is going to be that he doesn't have access to the hero buff. So where I would normally use Nick Fury support on this stage, I cannot because he's not a hero anymore. So that's kind of the one issue. The other issue is that you want the Judgment proc. If you're using a Judgment specifically, you want a Judgment proc to go on the tier 3 ability. And in order to do that, you want to charge it up for the first and then third rotations rather than the second. And that's a bit of a difference from... Oh, he's got really nice tracking on the 4th skill. That's a bit of a difference from this uniform. Or sorry, from the old uniform, where you want to not charge it up on the first rotation because you can pop the tier 3 on the second rotation. So the judgment sort of cascade is like 1 and 3, the first rotation and the third rotation with this uniform, rather than skip the first rotation and then do 2, and then it's basically even and odd, essentially. So we did it in 45 seconds. So the big difference is you don't really want to charge up the Judgment on the first proc on the initial rotation. You want to splash in an extra 2 skill to charge up the tier 3, and then you want to fully charge and then rip. This does give him more burst damage, and it appears like he's stronger on the opening rotation. But it's just a different way of playing him, essentially. But he does charge up the tier 3 faster. That's undeniable. But then you do want to charge it up here. So it's a bit of a different playstyle. Obviously, it can be more advantageous, for sure. But I think the results kind of speak for themselves. Obviously, without the tier 3, it's a different story. And this actually ends up being slightly slower. Now, I think if he hadn't moved midway through my tier 3, I probably would have gotten it a little bit faster. It would have been about 5 seconds faster. But with a much better support, he's between 5 seconds faster and 5 seconds slower, depending on if the boss moves and depending on your ability to sort of synchronize the Judgment proc, the Judgment amplification proc with his tier 3. Whereas with the new Miles Morales uniform, you just kind of just play. You know, you kind of just go through the rotation. He does a lot of damage, and when it lands, it lands. So I do prefer that to this old one. It has less micromanaging. This uniform feels like it has more micromanaging. It has more timing. You spend more time running around, building up the Judgment proc. The new Miles uniform moves around more between 2 and the other skills. So it feels like it organically, kind of automatically charges the Judgment proc, the amplification proc more consistently. So that's my review for the Ancient Curse Miles Morales uniform. I think this is a pretty decent upgrade. It doesn't necessarily look like a lot on the surface aside from shifting him over to a villain, but that does open a lot of doors for him. It allows him to compete with the likes of Gwenpool, with the likes of Bullseye, while providing a lot more value in certain cases to a lot of players' accounts. So I think Miles is still positioned as one of the most attractive bang for your buck tier 4s in the game, particularly because you actually don't lose a lot with the old uniform, and it gives you the flexibility of turning him back into a hero, which is really nice. And basically the only thing that's stopping me from saying this is like an absolute must buy is the pending ABX ABL changes. But if there were an ABL day for speed male villain and he was, you know, top tier competitive with Bullseye, then you'd have a no questions asked situation where this is an absolutely high tier meta uniform. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with it. I think these are the kinds of upgrades we need to expect from players, from characters nowadays. This is more in line with the value that we need as players. Hit me up in the comments down below. Let me know what you think. Thank you so much for watching the video. Smash the like button if you enjoyed the content, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.